Before I begin, I would like to start by acknowledging the unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh. Gayasaka, and thank you for coming to this press conference in which Heiltsuk launches its charter challenge against the RCMP for failing to enforce Heiltsuk bylaws. We will start with a short video followed by speakers. Please hold your questions until after you have heard from our speakers. There will be a time for speakers to take questions.
The Heiltsuk Nation is bringing this litigation forward against the RCMP, simply said, to enforce our bylaws.
We had our own laws when I was growing up. We had to abide by it. We didn't have the RCMP here, and the elders were the ones that looked after it, took care of it. Everybody else.
The relationship that the Heiltsuk have with the RCMP has been fraught. We faced systemic discrimination and a deep sense of distrust.
When you need their help, they don't show up. They don't come. So what does that say to our people? In my family, we lost a loved one. And the second one was an overdose of drugs. It's hard to witness, especially when it's your family. And it's very sad that we have to bury some of our loved ones.
I don't know if we're going to be able to deal with these issues that we're dealing with. It just gets so out of hand. I lost my oldest daughter to fentanyl.
The RCMP folded his arms and he said to me, there's not much they can do. Our hands are tied.
Our community has bylaws to keep our community safe, and they include keeping our community safe from drug trafficking, creating a safe space for people that have been assaulted, and for keeping our community safe from trespassers.
My next encounter was with another police, and it was the same questions, because not just one incident happens here, many incidents happen here. And he also told me that it's our bylaws. Our bylaws are the ones that are creating the boundaries. Our hands are tied. This was their expression all the time. Our hands are tied.
When the RCMP refuses to enforce Heiltsuk bylaws, we feel that it's discriminatory towards our governance, to our people. It enhances the fear, of our people calling the RCMP for help because they don't support our community in that way.
A bylaw is a bylaw. Once it's enacted, it's a bylaw. You have to enforce it.
All we're trying to ask for is to be able to take care and protect our young people from this. And we've gone to court. I've been trying to do this for over 30 years, 35 years. I hope someday we'll be able to do that before we start losing too many of our young people. We don't seem to have the same rights still that the rest of Canada has. Why do you develop the laws that you develop and can't use them?
I feel like it's discrimination.
You develop.
Thank you. I would now like to call on our elected chief councillor, Gawajit Marilyn Slett.
Before I start, I would like to respectfully acknowledge the unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh Nations on which we are gathered here today. I would like to thank all of you for joining us here today. My name is Marilyn Slett, and I'm the elected Chief Counselor of the Heiltsuk Nation. Heiltsuk Nation is launching a charter challenge against the RCMP for failing to enforce our bylaws. Our bylaws are laws recognized by Canada and BC, yet the RCMP is not enforcing them. We are doing this on the heels of a monumental moment in our history last week, as our Heiltsuk Nation voted to approve a written Heiltsuk Constitution. And I want to start by acknowledging and celebrating our Heiltsuk Constitution. It's an affirmation of our inherent Indigenous legal traditions by us and for us. Our Constitution was decades in the making, and there's more work ahead of us as we move towards governing beyond the Indian Act. But right now, we're governing our community and we're facing a critical problem. This is because the RCMP won't even enforce our bylaws despite them being made under the Indian Act. We filed our lawsuit today against the RCMP in the Supreme Court of British Columbia. We are suing the RCMP because of their refusal to enforce Heiltsuk bylaws, duly enacted by Indigenous band councils as federal laws under the Indian Act. This amounts to unequal and discriminatory treatment that infringes our Section 15 charter rights to receive equal protection and benefit of the law without discrimination. And we're not alone. This refusal to enforce First Nations bylaws is a Canada-wide issue that erodes the rule of law in First Nations communities, exacerbates systemic problems involving substance abuse, deprives First Nations governments of the necessary tools to protect our communities. There is no legal impetus preventing the RCMP from enforcing our bylaws. The only barrier appears to be the racism and discrimination that sees them ignoring Indigenous bylaws while enforcing all other federal laws, as well as property laws on behalf of non-Indigenous communities, landowners, and businesses. Even though the RCMP does not pick or choose which federal laws to enforce in any other instance, they are choosing to ignore federal laws passed by Indigenous governments. Bella Bella, like many Indigenous communities and non-Indigenous communities alike, is experiencing a crisis in public safety and in well-being due to violence and to addictions exacerbated by drug dealing. These harms, from drug overdoses to sexual violence, have been made worse by the RCMP's refusal to enforce our bylaws, as drug dealers and sexual offenders can act freely without fear of enforcement on reserve. Given the risk of violence and the improbability of action, witnesses are reluctant to agree to testify, to press charges, or even provide basic facts to the RCMP. This further undermines the trust between our community and the police and moves us farther away from reconciliation. Our lawsuit seeks equal treatment to that provided to non-Indigenous communities through the assistance in removing any individuals who has no right to reside on reserve lands, or who has lost residency rights due to dangerous activity, or whose activities create a risk to public safety in accordance to the nation's bylaws. We also want to thank the Union of BC Indian Chiefs and other Indigenous leaders for standing with us here today as we launch this charter challenge on behalf of our community, with the goal of protecting communities and saving Indigenous lives across Canada. This lawsuit should be a wake-up call for all Canadians who believe in the Charter of Rights and Freedoms and equal protection and benefit of the law without discrimination. The RCMP needs to meet the terms of its policing agreements and start enforcing the law today without discrimination. Gayaksika.
Thank you. I would now like to call on Himas Wigwigtha.
Good morning, everyone. I also would like to thank you for being here. And my chieftainship is from the outer islands of our territory. I'm also would like to express my appreciation to the Tsleil-Waututh, Musqueam, and Squamish people for allowing us to carry on our business that we have to do today. For many, many years, we have faced adversities through the governments that have imposed upon us their laws and rules. When we've tried to enact or our bylaws, they're basically ignored. We have tried many times to make things right for our people. This is the reason why we're here today. I've witnessed and experienced discrimination from the RCMP for the way that they carry out and enforce the rules for Canada. I remember as a young boy, the fear that was placed on our people. The fear of Indian agents and RCMP. When I was a young boy, the RCMP and the Indian agents were not in our village. RCMP was in Ocean Falls. The Indian agent was in Bella Coola. As soon as the boat rounded the corner close to Bella Bella, news went out and our people scrambled to protect themselves. This is what we're doing. We're trying to protect ourselves with the bylaws that we have in place. If the RCMP is not going to do it, we'll have to find ways to do it ourselves. We're asking them to make an extra effort to protect our young people and our citizens at home. We all have rights and responsibility And we need to see that take place. And we need to see actions from our governments. I would like to thank you again for taking the time and being here today. Walas kukla.
Thank you, Himas Wigbawakias. At this time, I would like to take a moment to introduce and thank Grand Chief Stuart Phillips for attending today. Grand Chief Stuart Phillips has served as the president of the Union of BC Indian Chiefs since 1988. We are honored to have him attend this press conference today. I would like to invite him up to the podium to speak at this time.
Why Pisnaxil, Isquis, Asiut. As is our tradition, I'd also like to acknowledge the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh people on whose territory we have the privilege and honor of doing this incredibly important work. I grew up in a time in the 50s and the 70s where there was social order, there was general public respect for law and order, for the police, and the justice system during that time functioned a lot more efficiently than it does. Sentences were fitting to the crimes, and we still had capital punishment back in the day, and things have absolutely eroded since that time. Public safety is a fundamental human right. Safety of property and home also is a fundamental human right. And our First Nations communities are in extremely dire circumstances with the opioid crisis. We're losing so many of our precious young people to overdose deaths. And I want to say that I have personally experienced losing my firstborn son to an overdose, a carfentanil overdose. He was 6'3", 220 pounds, and he was the apple of my eye. I remember when he was born, I was driving back from the hospital and I pulled over and just broke down and cried. At that point, I had 2 daughters, and the first son was just a miracle. And then I lost him on his birthday. So I know the pain of violence, of drug-related homicides, assaults, home invasions, and our communities desperately need a full measure of law and order, and we can only do that by developing our own laws, our own legal institutions, our own justice system. And I'm very, very proud of the Heiltsuk people for showing us the way, showing us the path forward. I was so elated when their constitution was approved. Constitutions are foundational documents that all our laws and legal orders, legal institutions rest upon. And it's one of the first steps the development of our own laws and bylaws is the second step. And that needs to happen, not only in Heiltsuk territory, but right across this country. And one just has to go outside to know of the public safety concerns on the street. So the Union of BC Indian Chiefs is so proud and so deeply honored to stand with the Heiltsuk people. We have done that on many occasions. The herring issue comes to mind. I thought I was going to be on a boat with Chief Slett. At one point I was a little nervous about that, but they're wonderful people, they're good people, and they're leaders. And again, I'm just so grateful to be here to support the good work that they've done. I'm proud to say that Chief Slett's one of our executive members on the Union of BC Indian Chiefs, and she's our ambassador. She goes to Geneva and places like that. I want to acknowledge our wonderful staff here at the front. We have an incredible staff, young people, you know, very well educated young people. So I want to thank everyone for being here to acknowledge this wonderful moment. And again, I have such a deep respect for the leadership of the Heiltsuk people. Why? Lim.
Thank you, Grand Chief. Are there any questions for Chief Slett and Himas Wigwigbarwakias?
Hi, I'm Ashley. I'm with the Canadian Press. Chiefs, we talked about, I know this issue's been going on for a long time. Is there a specific moment or a specific incident that led to, I don't know, the RCMP crossing a line that made you decide that this lawsuit was the right thing to do?
Yeah, thank you for that question. It's been, you've seen in the video and with Harvey's words here today, it's been an accumulation of time and inaction of the RCMP that led to this. We were, launching this legal challenge to secure equal treatment and enforcement. And we felt that this was the only path that we had for them to, start implementing and enforcing our community bylaws.
And when you talk to the mountains, presumably, I'm assuming you would have brought this up to them before you go to the courts. What is the reaction we get from them? What do they say to you when you say, look, our bylaws say that this person is not allowed on our territory? Get them out. What reaction do you get from the mountains?
We've had many, many meetings with the RCMP. There is a detachment in our community that's been there for a number of years. And our leadership, our joint leadership has met several times over the years with the RCMP. And there is no legal barrier to the RCMP enforcing our bylaws. But they have offered excuses ranging from confusion to saying our bylaws need to go through the RCMP legal services for review. But, it hasn't provided for any enforcement of our bylaws.
My name is Benoit. I'm with the French CBC. You mentioned the drug problem many times. A lot of communities are facing that issue. According to you, what's the impact of the RCMP action or lack of action on the drug dealing issue?
our community, is experiencing a crisis in our community due to drugs and drug trafficking. And there's so much concern and fear from, mothers and fathers and grandparents and family members, really worried that we're going to lose someone, a young person. So without, identifying any specific victims, we can say that these harms from drug overdoses and to sexual violence has been made worse by the RCMP not enforcing our bylaws.
David Ball, Indigenous. Sir, can I get you to use that for a second? Indigenous. I'm wondering if you could talk about your constitution, just briefly how it came to be and why it's so important beyond this particular issue with the policing.
So last week we ratified our Heiltsuk Constitution, and it was decades in the making. And we started working on it with our HEMAs and our community, our matriarchs, our knowledge keepers in the community. It's based on our values, our laws, and our beliefs as Heiltsuk people. So for us, that is not new. That has been there, since time immemorial. But we felt that it was important to develop that written constitution so people know how our decision making is made, who we are as Heiltsuk people, and what guides us, and what how we make those decisions and why we make those decisions. And is written by our people.
Hi, Krista Dow with Global National. Can you walk us back to the relationship between the RCMP and the nation and how it evolved and how you got to this point?
So our relationship with the RCMP, they've been in our community for decades with a detachment. And there's, and I think I'd like to share, there's been really good RCMP officers that have come into our community that, has made friends and really been involved in our community. But the reason why we're bringing this forward is the systemic racism and discrimination within the RCMP system that, prevents the RCMP from enforcing our bylaws, our community bylaws. And, that has been, the major focus of why, we've brought this forward. We're known on the coast for our hospitality as Heiltsuk people. We're a welcoming community. We welcome people into our community. We're leaders in Heiltsuk. That means to turn something around and make it right again. We don't have a word for reconciliation, but that is a Potlatch term in our language. So, doing this today, it's always going to court and filing any charter challenges is always sort of the last, thing that we'll do. We've, felt that we've exhausted everything else in terms of, trying to work with them, to work with us in collaboration with us as Indigenous government, for the Heiltsuk.
Apologies. Sorry, didn't know you could follow up. There you go.
And can you just speak to the implications this would have for other Indigenous communities across Canada and in BC and First Nation communities and what this might mean for them as well?
So one of the things that we did, and you heard Grand Chief Stuart Phillip talk about the lack of enforcement, and we brought a resolution to the Union of BC Indian Chiefs Chiefs Council meeting just over a week ago, and had unanimous support from the Chiefs Council to support our resolution. And we were seeking support and their feedback on the, supporting us with the Charter Challenge. And through that dialogue, so many of the leaders from different communities across BC talked about the similar issues that they're facing in their communities.
Hi, Chief Slett. It's Ben Milger with CTV News. Can you just talk a little bit about how the lack of enforcement emboldens criminals and predators in your territory and intimidates victims and survivors?
So when the RCMP put up their hands and say that, they, can't or, they won't enforce our bylaws, it provides for an atmosphere in the community where people that, may be doing something wrong, drug dealing and other, maybe sexual violence or assaults, it really provides for, people feeling like they're unchecked. They have no fear of, their activities, and that's wrong. We have people in our community that, have, reached out to the RCMP and they don't show up. This is discrimination, it's racism. It wouldn't happen anywhere else, but it's happening in the Heiltsuk community.
And then just a follow-up question. I notice on the cover page of the lawsuit that the defendant is the Attorney General of Canada, but you have not named the RCMP specifically or the BC RCMP. Is there a legal reason for that?
Sorry, I couldn't hear you.
I just noticed that the Attorney General of Canada is listed as the only defendant and not specifically the RCMP or the BC RCMP, and I'm just wondering if there's a reason behind that.
Ruben, do you want to?
Ruben, do you want the mic?
Thanks, Ben. Okay. All right, just very briefly, because it's not my story, but just an answer to the legal question. Yes, there's a legal reason. That's how you sue the force. That's what they're called, the RCMP. Thank you.
Hi, Monica Golis, City News. I'm just looking if you could talk about what sort of outcome you're hoping out of this.
Well, to be really in simple words, that they work with our community and they work with us to enforce our community bylaws. It's really frustrating for our community, for our leadership, citizens of our nation, when the RCMP, refuses to work with our governance and our community. They have, we've focused on two bylaws. One is a residency bylaw, and the other is a trespassing bylaw. And they have refused to enforce them, and all we want is equal treatment. These are laws, and the RCMP is choosing not to enforce them.
Anyone else? Yes. Okay.
Lauren Collins, Black Press Media. What steps is the nation taking in terms to support citizens of the nation in what I assume will be an emotional undertaking?
One of the things that, our leadership talked about last week when we were, going through the finer details of everything being filed and going forward, and that was top of mind, around how our community would feel, and we've, ensured that, our community members would be supported. We have a crisis line in our community that our governance supports and funds, and these are as a result too of the RCMP not, enforcing and not working with our community. We've had community patrol in our community as well, our own people that are, on shift in the evenings. These are all results, of impacts to our community, but they're also, our, it's been our response to supporting our community.
I just have one more, if you don't mind. This is a Supreme Court charter challenge, and those are not quick lawsuits to work their way through the system. I'm wondering, A, how you're feeling about the length of time this is likely going to take, and what you think should be done sort of in the interim between now and when you get a decision on this case, likely years from now.
Yeah, definitely, court challenges are not quick solutions. But we did feel that, there was no other alternatives for us. We had tried everything. We had tried, writing letters. We've tried meeting with them. We've, had, different agreements, with respect to the Indigenous police officers that, are in the community. We've gone to great lengths to, to work with the RCMP. Our hope is, by moving forward, that, we will, find that the charter challenge, recognizes that discrimination, and that, this changes. This changes the relationship between RCMP and Indigenous communities, not just for Heiltsuk, but for all communities.
I have another question here. You mentioned a few times people trespassing on your land. How often does that happen, and how big an issue is it for you?
So we do have a trespass law, a bylaw, and there are times when people that, pose that they pose a threat to public safety. These sometimes come forward with other members of the community that raise it with leadership, that raise it with the RCMP. And, we've tried to, go through the proper means with our bylaw to, ask them to leave, that there's a process in place, and, the RCMP, won't, work with our community to enforce them. And, it just leaves, that, it just leaves it so, these people that, continue to pose that threat, stay in the community as long as they want. This is not right. It's not right. It doesn't happen anywhere else. In non-Indigenous communities, if a business owner or a property owner has a trespasser, the RCMP go and they implement, those provincial laws to remove them. If it happens on a reserve, like the Heiltsuk, they don't do anything.
I would like to thank each and every one of you for attending this press conference. As I have mentioned, Chief Slett and Himas Hamchit are now available for interviews in this room. They're also available for private interviews. Mr. Tillman's contact information is available on the press release. Thank you again for all who attended.
I'd just like to respond to that question that was raised about what is the impact of not having enforceable bylaws and legal orders in our communities, in our First Nations communities. I'm a member of the Penticton Indian Band, St. Pinkton, and during the course of the time that I've been involved in leadership, 50 years, when there's a vacuum, something will always come in and fill that vacuum. And in our case, you may recall, you know, as time goes by, but I would have to guess 20 years ago, there was a big news story. We had two of our band members out cutting firewood, and a helicopter dropped out of the sky and landed in a clearing. And the pilot gets out and he runs over to the woodcutters. And when he gets close, he says, "You're not my ride." And then he ran off into the trees. So we brought in the RCMP and the Minister of Transport and Public Safety and everything like that. And they brought a team from Vancouver, Kelowna, and we said, "We'll meet you at the helicopter site." So we waited and waited and waited, and we finally got a phone call. And they said, "We're here, where are you?" It turned out there were two helicopters involved in this, and it turned out it was a Hells Angels trans-border operation. When there's a lack of law enforcement, it attracts the drug community, and they come into our communities. And we have houses that are the center of operations for these drug dealers. And it's virtually impossible to shut them down. You know, we know who they are. We provide names and so on to the RCMP. But as Chief Slett says, they say, well, there's nothing we can do. And that's why this is so essential that we have enforceable bylaws. The first victims are women and girls in regard to assault. And elders are at risk with home invasions, because once you have a population of addicted people, they will do anything to feed their habit. So this is such an incredibly important issue for our First Nations communities. And I just wanted to raise those points about, you know, what are the consequences as life goes forward? And we're virtually defenseless. And that has to stop. Thank you.